Дорогие друзья, мы продолжаем.
Dear participants, we're going to continue our International Theosophical Congress now. Cosmogenesis, Theogenesis, Anthropogenesis, and today we are going to tackle the first Sloka of the first stanza of the first volume of the Secret Doctrine. Today we are going to speak about one of the most important parts. And the first one to open the roundtable discussion is the speaker that we have already seen today, Madam Dylykova-Parfionovich. My dear colleagues, I would like to try and do my commentary about the first volume, stanza 1, Sloka 3 of the Secret Doctrine. As a Tibetalogist, I consider this from the point of view that I am aware of. So there it starts. There was no universal mind, for there was no Yaryi to accommodate it. In the first version of the latest version of Kalachakra, we encounter the link between the statement of the Secret Doctrine about the universal mind and the example in Kalachakra Tantra. (176), sentence 16. When the heaven was created, there was no palace. It's also interesting to notice that it is not only in Kalachakra Tantra. The same phrase can also be found later, which says that there was no heaven and nothing existed. From the myths of ancient India, we know the following. At the very beginning, apart from the primordial chaos, there was nothing. And there were anxieties that bore the golden egg with the golden germ. That golden germ was created by the creator of all living beings. The visionary, so this is the citation from the Secret Doctrine. Three texts of Kalachakra Tantra are represented in a very complex Tibetan language, which is archaic, which is called Sombo. Complexities that occur while translating those texts are linked to not following to the grammar of Tibetan language. And Tantra's text with the coding, as well as the Tibetan terms that have multiple meanings and mystical vocabulary. Hence, therefore, in the first variant of the second book of Kalachakra Tantra, I'm going to read you a citation. It is about 7 lions, wild animals, that are powerful, that have the power of Brahman, were born here. That was a sentence from Kala Chakra. And the keys used to decoding can be guessed. But in fact, it is about the 7 sages of Riksha that form the constellation of the Great Bear, Ursa Major, which bore the theme of the first most important person. That consisted of water and the decreasing, reducing sun. Page 176, sentence 9. This is the fire energy of the first black sun, the energy that has not been purified. The sun is very dark, that mixes with water and bears a living being. So this is the birth that was always very somber and very dark, very gloomy. And then they became more obvious, clearer, and that's where the clear light occurs that Evgenia Shapornikova mentioned in her presentation. Speaking of the authenticity of the planets and the constellations, the Shamhara kingdom is mentioned. There was something that was kept until the present time, when it was assumed that Shanhala was in different places, what could be found in different places. As the result of studying that question, I came to a conclusion that Shamhala appeared, and existed in the solar system, together with its capital. Translated into Russian from Sanskrit, Shamhala means the source of happiness. As for the Mount Meru, then that mount also is located in the solar system, and it has its twin on the Earth, Mount Kailasa. So as you can see, they built the correspondence of different bodies in the space, such as the planets and the sun, and they reflected that on the terrestrial plane of Mahabharata and Ramayana. As the result, we see the key to all codes, all symbols that are in digits. For example, the great battle. The great battle that took place took around 18 days. What does that mean, those 18 days? 18 days that led to the victory of Ashna. That is, 18 is 9 times 2. So on the one hand, we have one planet consisting of 9 constellations, and the other planet also consisting of 9. That's something they were fighting, and then one over the other. That's how I understand that. Moving on. Speaking of the eternal mind that HPB mentions, the eternal mind that is linked to the idea, to the thought. The thought in Tibetan language is also rendered by Dapshishita, translated into Russian, as the enlightened thought. This term is connected with the whole Tibetan yoga, which is esoteric, which is of esoteric nature, and is called 6 yogas Naraba. Those 6 yogas were included into the text of Kalachakra Tantra, slightly changed. Out of those 6 yogas, we can pick one yoga. Yoga of the where the conscience changes its place. So that's everything that was put into a human's body, that as a result of a very complex yoga practice, after a long process of meditative practices, so the yogin perceives the state of a bright light that can also be found in the calendars of Kalachakra Tantra. So that bright light is the same term. As a result, at the deathbed, the yoga of bright light comes to the foreground. Is associated with the yoga of the higher chakra, that's called Ushnisha. And as a result of coming those 2 yogas together, we get a light, fluffy ball. And that little light ball passes through the inner channel that is called Avatfuti channel. As a result, if the yoga is performed well, then the yogin can reach a remarkable result. There is an opening in the crown of the person, and that opening is used for that fluffy light ball that we just mentioned, that escapes from the body. If a yogin wants to continue his terrestrial path, then they can, given that he does possess certain knowledge that is required for that, he can return that light, fluffy ball and continue his path with a comprehensive understanding of that process. This yoga also found its reflection in astral yogas that are linked with the astronomic work Kalachakra Tantra. The main works that represent the commentary and that account for 226 huge writings are dedicated mostly, exclusively to astronomical works, only including their own complete commentary to Sanskrit texts that were called Galaxy Milky Way. So this enlightened thought, in Tibetan, can be translated as the heart of the awakening mind, consists of the absolute, Patichista, which is a void. I will not be speaking about that void for a long time, because that void is a key term and a concealed term in Kala Chakra Tantra. Out of 20 types of void, if you're not bored, then I will continue. So out of those 20 types of void are represented by 16 goddesses, Ushnisha. What is an Ushnisha? Ushnisha is a bump on the head of Buddha, or a node of hair on the yogin's head. Out of those 16 on the crown can be placed in 7 chakras. 7 types of void in 7 chakras that represent planets in the body of the person. So in the heart of the person there is a lunar disk that makes one of the planets. So that's the heart chakra, which is used for meditation. It is the heart where the mind, the enlightened thought come together by joining two drops, the white one and the red one. And they form that little ball that we call the bright light. As a result, in the mandala of Kala Chakra, those planets that are mentioned and those 12 types of void symbolize 12 star signs that form one circle. Apart from that circle and 12 types of void, there is also the 13th type, which is located in the constellation that is called Serpentarius. And those 13 types of void are placed on Buddha's head. And in this way, 13 star signs represent Shanisha crown, the place of residence of 12 goddesses that represent 12 types of void. The rest 7 are placed on the planets in the circle of Kala Chakra mandala. So 20 types of void and are also present in the yogi's body, while the energies move in the person's body, which is the symbol of the universe. The number of planets and constellations, 9 and 28, are comprised in the body of each person. And the person has the main place in this process of the connection between the space and the earth. And that was mentioned a long, long time ago. And it was the coldest place in the space. Because the earth, just like I told you this morning, contains a burning fireball. And that's why the earth is living. And that's what distinguishes it from others. From others where there is only ice. That's why new planets that resemble the Earth represent the main and the most important task for us. Because HPB, in her diaries, and in her philosophic books, she mentioned that there is a planet that is just as wonderful as the Earth. And that would mean that the human civilization has a possibility to migrate there. And that's where all the idea of the disappearance of our planet comes from. The cosmology of ancient India presents a different story. There was a wonderful planet that was so rich and so rich due to all the gifts of the nature that it didn't have gods but asuras. But because asuras got multiplied and dumped everything on that planet ceased existing. And 4.5 billion years later disappeared.
We can also talk about how ancient astronomers saw the universe. It is not limited by our galaxy. It goes further. 28 constellations and 9 planets are only a small circle. Indologists and other experts suppose that there is also the middle circle. And besides that, there is also the largest circle. All this together is the entire picture of how the universe came to be, and this is its complete composition. There are other constellations and planets, and their names are not very well known. However, their number corresponds. Indian astronomers said that there are 28 constellations, and other astronomers concur. The numbers coincide. It means that the ancient people already had the entire knowledge of the universe. And they were saying that there were 3,000 universes in total. Is this right? Our researchers and foreign researchers say that the universe is infinite. It is expanding. And the expansion does not have any limits. I have been thinking a lot about this. And here's what I understood. 3,000 universes. This is indeed the right number. Because the same number, 3,000 universes, were discovered in the microcosm. It is called the human body. Here, we mean two fields of science that are interconnected: astronomy and the second part that is inseparable, that is medicine. And if we can decipher 4 Vedas, which contain the ciphered ancient medicine known to ancient people, then we could know how to cure deadly diseases. These are the diseases that exterminate the humanity just as wars do. I would really like if there were people who would want to continue the work of the decipherment of the sacred texts. Texts on astronomy and medicine. This will help to cure the diseases. These are the diseases that have the characters of the existing planets. And if this work is finished, then we will solve the matter of immortality and about the life of the human civilization. I thank you for your attention. Vilena, Dylykova, thank you very much. Colleagues, if you have comments or questions regarding the Sloka 3 of Stanza 1, you may have the floor. Let me say something. Here is an idea that we have. We do have stanzas from the book of Dzian. And HPP says that there was no universal mind because there was no ahi to contain it. Of course, the Theosophical terminology and the comments to the secret doctrine tell us that ahi is indeed a hierarchy of beings, and they are concentrated as Tian Kohans. These are cosmic celestial beings. I think that there is something very important, and that is the description of this universal mind, the mind that did not yet exist. HPB writes, mind is a set of states of consciousness. There are consciousness with the capital C, and they are united. And there is a set of states of consciousness. And this set is grouped together. It is grouped under certain determinants. Some of these determinants can be taken together and we can take a look at them geometrically. the aggregation of the state of consciousness, and there are three determinants. These three, how can they have the entire consciousness? How can they be the entire aggregation? This is consciousness. This is the first aggregation, the thought. The second aggregation, will. And the third aggregation is feelings. And all this together is the aggregation of states of consciousness, thought, will, and feelings. We can take a look at the planes of being. We can define how this is manifested in the tertiary state. We know that the first is the thought, the ideation. And the first thought was the first movement of cosmos. That was the thought. But without the will, this thought cannot manifest further. It does not have any movement. And feelings provide further differentiation of this aggregation of consciousness. And here is the idea. We have the three. HPB in her comments says that Ahi is both level 1, 2, and 3. We can say that the first is the reflection of the Absolute, the second is the manifested Logos, and the third is the septenary manifestation. Then we can say that the hierarchy of Dzian Kogans as Ahi is something that defines all of the planes of being. And here is the idea. All this is all planes of being. This is the plane of spirit without form. The Absolute, its reflection, the plane of gods. This is the plane of the spirit, and then the plane of prototypes. This is the unmanifested state of consciousness. These are the lower planes. They are manifested through a special hierarchy. Ah is an inhalation. If we say ah, physically, we will make an inhalation. Ah is an inhale. And this inhalation is coming from the outside inside and comes into this point. These are the three planes. We can concentrate them when we make this inhalation and then ah vanishes. A person breathes and there is a certain small pause between exhalation and inhalation. If we pay attention, this does not occur simultaneously. There is a pause between inhalation and exhalation. And if we consider the cosmic symbolism, this is where this pause occurs. And the universe at that time became small. This is pralaya. Then there is a pause, and the plane of prototypes comes together. And then after that, the second part, he, goes as an exhalation. Ah, he. This is the hierarchy of the celestial beings. This is the inhalation and exhalation. And we see it here on the planes of being. We see the geometry. And you can even see that Ahi is written with a hyphen. And this is how it equals to the planes of being. This is one of the ideas to understand how we can understand the segregation of the state of consciousness. We have thought, we have will, and HPB says that this is Dzian Cohen's, and she says that they are a united hierarchy. And then there is a single manifestation in the seven-pointed star, and all this reflected on the seven planes of being. And then everything else occurs. This is everything that happens in stanza 1, 2, and 3 of the volume 1. This is the idea that we had. Do we have any comments from those who participate online? We will now see our participants. We have Hwang from South Korea. We have Ritva Lappi from Finland, and Mikhail is participating as well. Sergei Kolganov. I'm indeed very pleased to see all of you. I would have said a different word, to explain how happy I am to see you. So what do you think of this idea of Ahi? Ahi being an aggregation of all planes of being as a representation of inhalation and exhalation. Inhalation is pralaya. The universal mind is always there. It is in pralaya, but it is not manifested. And then he is the exhalation or Manvantara. And through the aggregation of these celestial beings, through this hierarchy, it is then manifested. So let's start and it all starts with Manvantara. And HPB says that this manifestation starts at the dawn of Manvantara. And the dawn of Manvantara is bright, blinding light that is the first seven-pointed star. And it is so high that it is blinding. It is wide, blinding light. And if we take a look at the seven-pointed star, the seven-pointed star has all correlations of colors. Orange, purple, red, blue, dark blue, they all correspond to the planets. It means that in their essence, these colors are hidden, but there is the gradation, they are not manifested. And when we have the dawn of Manvantara, we can recognize this light. This is the reflection of Absolute. HPB reminds us that the universal mind can be compared to the Absolute mind. But we need to take into account that this is the reflection of the Absolute mind, because the Absolute mind exists always. It is unchanging. It exists all the time. Do you have any other ideas or comments? Raise your hand and I will give you the floor. Sergey, would you like to say something? And now let's turn to Hwang. Please provide your comments on Sloka 3.
I have studied modern astronomy, like constellation from the observation basis. I don't know the meaning of the color of stars. It represents the age, usually age of the star. The color represents the age of the star. But I don't know how to figure out your style. I need to study more. I'm sorry.
Это хорошая идея.
This is indeed a very good idea to start studying the secret doctrine. Yesterday, our partner, our colleague, Mr. Franzuzov, spoke to us. He has been participating for many years already, and just yesterday he purchased the 2 volumes of the secret doctrine, and I told him, well, now you do have the secret doctrine. Time has come to study the book, he said. You know, it is indeed the time to start studying the secret doctrine. Colleagues and I discussed today, when we approach this knowledge, we can explain everything. We also have a comment from Ritva. Ritva, please, you have the floor.
There is so wonderful presentation. I have so that's it. But I tried to thinking. It's very important. Just when you told that how symbolic way all happened, because I think so that breath, when meditation is very important. When we breathe inside, outside, and we are present here, this moment. And I think so HPP understands that because he told just what mean space, and same things happened us when happened in macrocosmos. And mind, Buddhist philosophy, mind always said it's the same like space, and space is blue. And there is a color. Color is very important, and my mind is not clear now. But I think so. How is different color is very important, and this is little detail, but I very funny. I told before when I was in St. Petersburg, young Theosophic man, you black. There is red, white, and blue, and usually red is fire, and when you speak, and white your body, nirmanakaya and sambhavakaya, and dharmakaya is blue, and you have 3 colors, but we have only 2 colors, and we can speak so a good way maybe. We are only white and blue, but this is detail. I think so. When I read last week just secret doctrine, I think so. There is text very deep level how this race cannot understand exactly what means space. But because we haven't sensed, we have only 5 sense. But when we continue the evolution, develop, we can get more sense. Maybe we understand more. I don't know if you have heard, but I remember maybe 7 rise come to Rasan. But maybe this is something New Age information. But maybe it is in a secret book. I don't remember exactly, but that is what I want to say just now. Not very shortly, but this is my ideas. Thank you very much. And this lady, I want to say
Thank you.
Okay, stop.
We also have other comments. The head of the Moscow School of Theosophy, Vladimir Yaryi. Once again, I would like to get back to the practice of meditation. Because what we're doing here, it is kind of meditation. Just some of us can see the problems or the ideas more distinctly. Those ideas that are dispersed in our minds, in our consciousness, in the day. HPV said that everything is energy. It's so easy to comprehend. You really don't have to think twice. Wherever we look, we only see the energy. And the aggregation of energy is called life. Is it so hard to comprehend? I also hear very often such remarks when people say, okay, you're speaking about philosophic terms, it's too abstract. Everyone needs something concrete, something more precise. I think that's the disease of the humanity. At this stage of passing from one state to another, that Mohat instructs us to do. So it instructs us to pass on, to connect in our spirits. I think that's a very simple term, and everyone has read about it, and people do use those aspects of the teaching. However, the problem is that we have not yet learned to reflect. And we can hear that in the teaching, we can understand that from the teaching very distinctly. So all those things that I have just mentioned lead us to the words that have already been heard. The differentiated light becomes rougher and rougher and darker and darker and even darker. And that darkness is the state that our consciousness rests in. So that the state of that narrow mindset, that mindset that we're used to, which is called the center of the energy. And that center of the energy that can be referred to as our usual mindset. We have to move away from that common mindset. And that's where the most important meditation starts. The meditation starts when the person reached the limit of the horror of the perception of their own darkness. It's called ignorance. And that's where Buddha started from. And every person starts for themselves from that very point. And that's the point that we can see on the wheel of time can be perceived in each and every moment of the current time. From seconds to ages. I think that's not so complicated to do. We should just allow the idea that we know nothing. And that's when all those terms and all those numbers, those endless values, those 15-digit numbers, the number of years of Mahakalpa or Manvantara, they become easily digestible because we have no limit. When we know not, we lost that limit. The limit of what? The limit of our understanding. Our mind becomes free. And that's what one tries to reach in every meditation. So that the emptiness, that void for the logical mind becomes the fullness for philosophic studies. That means for the abstract thinking. And when the abstract thinking becomes concrete, a concrete factor of apprehension of the world, That's when our consciousness becomes finer and thinner. And what expands our consciousness is just the fact that we know nothing. Can you imagine that? Learning expands consciousness, we would think, but there must be a reason for learning. And that reason is the power, that's the aptitude to study. And the meditation says that we are starting to awaken our consciousness. And the time that we are living in, and the time that we've just moved to, is a very important factor. And that factor shows us that very instant of the current flow of life that we can measure with the help of Kali, the goddess of time. It is with her help that we can focus our attention at the present moment of timelessness, the eternal flow. And Elena Blavatsky gives us the following idea, a quotation here.
Завистнику никогда не утолить зависти и никогда.
A quotation about enviousness, where someone who envies cannot become great. So that idea in itself tells us that someone who is envious, someone who is jealous, is limited. That's clear. So getting rid of that limit, that restriction, presupposes going to the zero state. Can we see Kala Chakra on the screen, please?
Вот сегодняшний день у нас
today
показывает день змеи желтой.
Today is marked as the yellow snake. The yellow snake, yellow serpent,
созвездие Овна, первого огня.
Is the constellation of Aries, the primary fire. So Theosophy says that God is the fire. Or the spiritual essence of the fire. He is not fire itself, he is the spiritual essence. That's the fire that does not burn. And it is at the very top of the wheel of time. The snake is in the central point out of 5. The first is the fire hare, the second is the dragon, the earthly dragon, and the third one is the earthly snake. It concentrates in itself like a point where the idea of the highest constellation is focused, the idea of the primary fire. The symbol of snake is the mind, and the earth is not the earth that we as humans think of. The earth means the ability to understand. That's the state of consciousness that is absolute in its transparency, in its lack of color. There is no color, no light. Some aspect or some category is lacking. And that ray of colorlessness is this void, this emptiness that the forces can operate in, just like a circle with a white disc that has a line in it. And that line always has a possibility to turn around itself in its movement, and therefore creating that circle of a snake biting its own tail. And it is exactly in the same way that this yellow snake bites this idea, this divine thought. And that movement, that sputtering movement, sizzling movement creates this cycle, this hissing movement creates this cycle. It's a very important aspect. And as you know, the snake is always in this position, and the head is always static. It doesn't wobble. It's only the body that does. It corresponds to the energy of the law of karma, which is always calm, always reasonable, whereas the body undergoes all those transformations dependent on the need at this or that particular moment, saving that energy, basically fehot energy. Because the movement, just like a sinusoid, shows the rise and fall, rise and fall, rise and fall. And the civilization rises and falls, moves to a different plane. And that movement of the snake creates that hierarchical beginning. So the symbols and the principles that are referred to as the principles that are not given, they reflect very deep formulas. The formulas that each and every one of us should allow ourselves. That's something that can be found in the secret doctrine and in the works of Elena Roerich, of Nidanas, and in Tibetan literature. They were just simply translated from the old Dzian manuscripts, translated into Russian, and we can absorb that knowledge already. It's just the time has come. The time has come for this knowledge to pour out into the world. The time has come. And we do not need to think that we are not capable of perceiving that, of apprehending that. No, that time means the necessity, the need of that at this particular moment, for this spike, this rise of evolution to pass to the world of the mind. And finally, that time touched upon us just like it touched upon the Atlants. And the Atlanteans, and that's where the race becomes what it is, and that's the monadic part of life. The creativity of a love that transforms, that connects, that joins, and that unites the humanity. The symbol of that humanity can be seen in the 7-ray star. In its nature, each ray represents a race of humanity. And for our humanity, for the 4th circle of Earth, a symbol means the space. So that symbol of the space that the Muslims at some point said that belongs to them. Assigned. And that means the bosom. And that's why the space on the wheel of time is represented as the moon. As you can see it here, right? The symbol of moon, the symbol of the space. And as for the sun, there is only the impulse that is located at the top of the wheel of time. And that's where the thought bears its beginning from. And that ray continuing its movement from the world, from the plane of mind and art, creativity. And this principle starts acting through Ahi. And what is that Ahi? Those are the essences. And if we look closer, then we'll realize that the person itself, the human being, is indeed Ahi. Just like Mrs. Dylykova said, if you want to we want to see the mount at that wheel, we can just look closer here. And we will see that the star points at the mount. That's Marrow Mount. Or the Kailas, terrestrial Kailas. And we can find it here in Kala Chakra, on Kala Chakra too. And that's called the mountain world. The teaching says that we should take the path of the pure thought, that we should not descend into the world which is below, beneath. This is something that is also marked here on the diagram as a dark lake. That's nothing but those waters of life that we bathe in, that we were born in, that we die in, that lower world that supports life in us. And so that yellow snake is actually the today's date. And we've just seen that we can speak about principles, about mysteries, about reasons that are the reason of the reasonless reason of everything. And that reasonless reason of everything is our silence. We live in that reasonless reason. And when, as a result of the meditation, when we obtain some kind of understanding or clarity of some aspects of that one, it's at that very moment that we become the creators, because in accordance to the image that we have, the thought is being born. That's something that a human being is not capable of doing. We just cannot do that. That's the most important problem. In order to bear a thought, that a person is not capable of bearing a thought by themselves. And the fifth circle, people of the fifth circle, the humanity, are capable of that. And those capabilities are manifested on the earth. And those souls were and are, and they're enumerated in the teachings. And we, the terrestrial humans, we can only imagine that image and create a thought together. That's why we need to learn as a group. Those who learn, those who study by their own will always remain limited. That's why there were always lodges, groups, schools, directions, movements, and it always required two people plus a teacher, in a very fine image. So there must be this communication, and communication is happiness. If there is no communication, there is no happiness. That's one of the examples of what is happening now. This Congress that we are participating in is very significant. It's not the same significance that a different Congress in St. Petersburg had. That one had a different level of understanding, a different way of understanding, a different approach to understanding, even though that Congress was wonderful, but that was such a long time ago. And what we're doing now, we're just learning to communicate. And we are learning to communicate with different countries, with different states of consciousness. We do not need to go anywhere, to take a plane or train to go anywhere. We don't need to travel, because the technologies allowed us to communicate in this way, and nevertheless remain on the plane of consciousness. That's something that pushes us forward in the spirit of communication. We feel the joy and we feel that happiness. Even though we are locked down, we are like bottled in our apartments, we break through. We break out of it on the plane of consciousness. That's the human nature. So we have all the conditions to do that. There are no difficulties in it. The difficulties just do not exist anymore, because the difficulties are only attracted by our own selves, by our own minds, when we say that we're not capable of doing something. We are. And that thought must be natural as breathing. And we will become Ahi, the bearers of the great rays of the nature of the human, or we become a cosmic person, at least representing that cosmic person. But as a community, as a whole, we are capable of reflecting a ray of space, the sun of that space, Hwang Kogan, which is the purple ray. That's what we're capable of representing, reflecting. Thank you. Thank you. Mikhail
Thank you very much.
Chiratyev would like to have a word. Good afternoon.
Yes, we do hear you perfectly. Thank you very much. Thanks for all those who gave their comments. And whenever Mr. Yaryi says, it gives lots of inspirations, and I am very grateful for his contributions. And when he speaks, there are spiral curls, and there are lots of associations. We do not have time to talk about each and every one of this association. So I would like to provide some comments, and then I would like to talk about the Sloka that we discussed today. You know that now there is a diversity of the magnetic aspects, and we live in a very different time. It is also thanks to these pandemics that we live through right now. And the quality of consciousness is different. People can be divided according to the quality of their consciousness, and that defines the quality of communication. And the Fourth Congress is indeed a turning point in a certain sense, that there is a special connection. Now, there is a certain transition. There is a very clear activity that has made us tied to the earth, and we're transitioning to something that is more abstract. And yes, we have heard many times that the speeches at the Congress were quite abstract, but this is for a reason. You know, when we have a certain thought, then everyone starts to approach that thought. Ahi basically means dragons. And what Vladimir Yaryi said right now, he spoke about the snake of the mind. And this snake moves in sine waves, in spiral forms. And the energy itself, when we have the space-time, then we have certain manifestations of various waves. In the Greek meaning, time can be more than just chronos, and time has not only a growing wave, but there are also certain breaks. This is when there is the accumulation, and then there is a transition period. Between Manvantara and small or long cycles, there are special transition periods. On the one hand, they crystallize everything that has been accumulated in the people's mind by the humanity as such, that is one, though it does not understand that it is one. And on the other hand, it is a swelling bud, it is a future flower. And now, this time coincide with this time of certain limits, of the time of restrictions. But now let's turn to the Sloka that we're discussing. The thing is, Ahi also has several stages of manifestation. Of course, it is the first three planes of beings. Then they all go through all of the planes, and it is only after the third plane when the differentiation starts. On the second plane, they reach the stage of formation, and on the third plane, they become manas and putras, and then they can be transformed into human form. Just like Kumars, just like Ahi, just like Dzian, Kohans. They can all go through a stage of human nature. Here's what I would like to note. There are different cycles of Manvantaras, and this is sometimes confusing. The cycle of Manvantaras that can be measured by a 15-digit figure, it refers to the solar system. And the largest part of the secret doctrine speaks about this part. But there is a number of shlokas that have to do with the universe. They refer to the entire universe, to the Father, Mother. And there are also lots of small Manvantaras. HPB wrote about that. There is this symbol of snake biting itself on its tail. And here's what it refers to. When a certain Manvantara is awakened, there are special stages where manifestations begin. And before human form occurs, Ahi do not have the freedom of will, and people do have the freedom of will. Ahi are forces, they're rays, and it is hard to imagine that a ray can have consciousness. HPB gave an explanation. They are conscious to the extent to which they act within the universal space. And then they reach the human form, and their consciousness is different. For that reason, it is very difficult for us to understand how the process of thinking occurs. What does it mean to be a non-formed being? It is hard to understand what it is to be the channels of the law. This is what refers to the manifestations of Ahi. Now, the time is very special. A new element is coming to be, and this element is related to the spatial thought. This is the aspect of fire that is related to the spatial thought. Right now, the worlds are coming together, and they come inside one another. We try to understand that somehow in the three-dimensional space and time framework, but all this occurs simultaneously. All these worlds come together, and they're all inside of us. If the thought is organized and if this thought is supported by the light of Buddhi, then it can happen. And right now, the humanity is coming to a stage where it is necessary to understand this thought. It is not something that blazes, but this is an inevitable stage of the spiritual cycle. But in order for us to ascend, the thought needs to come from the heart. Thank you very much indeed. You had a very interesting comment. Yes, there were a couple of ideas that you mentioned, which we would like to discuss now. Yes, here's what I wanted to add. When we talk about the ray, when we say that there is Ahi, the bearer of this mind, Ahi, or rays, are manifested through a man. They're manifested as clarity. Why clarity? The nature of Dzian Kohans reflects the prototypes of all future ones, and that is the plane of mind and creativity. That is because it is all manifested as Ahi. It is reflected as clarity of ideas, and for that reason there is will. But a human being has will, and a human being is the bearer of this mind. And for this reason, there is a special ability, the ability to reflect the reality. And now, the time concentrates everything in a transitional phase. Lots of cycles come together in it. And one of the cycles is Sati Yuga. Kali Yuga is large, and it includes Sati Yuga. And this is a special period of time. And now the humanity has a chance to become monadic, because Buddhi creates this ray, It is the bearer of this powerful wisdom. And it is possible now to catch this and to learn how to reflect this. This is what we're learning right now. This is what meditation is. Thank you very much. We also have comments from Mr. Rashupkin. I just have a short comment to make. Maybe this is something trivial. I am not well aware, or rather, I'm not a good expert in the secret doctrine. I really liked the interpretation provided here before, the interpretation of Ahi that was presented. It is indeed something that explains how many facets it has, but Ahi then reaches Manvantara, and this is something that touched me deeply. I just want to say why Ah goes first and he goes next. Why is Pralaya first and Manvantara then? Pralaya goes first. Pralaya after Manvantara would be something very clear for my understanding. And in the first stanza, even in the second shloka, HPB says about time where time was not. And there is a special state. There is a special state referring to Pralaya and Manvantara. This is something in between. This is something that is very different. And first, there is decay, and then there is the creation of the universe. This is brilliant. And then another point that I would like to say, we have actually several words in Russian to refer to mind and reason. There is a great writer. Sergei Alexeyev. He has an interesting book. The word mind can be divided into components. Ra, Ze, and the third component. In Russia, the mind was always understood as the flaming Ra, the Ra that is connected to the higher principles. And here is how we have the universal mind. Thank you. Thank you very much. I just want to say a couple of words. Speaking of Pralaya first and Manvantara coming second. Manvantara is there when there is the beginning. And when there is Manvantara, there is no beginning. But there is another idea. The full Pralaya has never been. There has also been a partial Pralaya after certain cycles of Manvantara. There was nothing. And when there is nothing, this is Manvantara. And we cannot say that Pralaya is first and Manvantara goes after. No, there was potency at first. Manvantara is the beginning when everything starts. This is a great addition that you made when you spoke about mind. Ra is the god of sun. And then we saw that in the third rays. Then Z. Even if we take a look at this letter, this is something that connects. It connects the top and the bottom. And this mind is something that brings together the end and the beginning, the night and the day. It is in clarity. This is a genius idea. Ahi, allowed to see clearly. They can connect mind and heart, and we become conscious, we become mindful. I now see that we have Mr. Pandey. Mr. Pandey, thank you very much for joining us. We are talking about the third shloka. We now would like to hear some other comments. I just want to make a very interesting comment. We can say that mind, which is razum in English, is ra and zoom, the application that we use today to communicate, come together. There are interesting linguistic comments that I would like to make. Ahi is the word that I was searching both in Sanskrit and in Tibetan language. There are no direct indications that this is a Sanskrit or a Tibetan word. However, there is a very similar word that says ahi with a very long e sound at the end. This is the word that we see in the 9th mandala of Rig Veda. This is the word that is at least 2,500 years old, and it means snake or serpent. And this refers to what was said before by Mikhail. There was an ancient Indian linguist. He created a dictionary of various words that are used in Vedas. And the word that I am telling to you about right now, ahi, with one H, not with two H's, but with one H. This is the word that was translated as heaven and earth. This is the connection of heaven and earth. This is just a linguistic comment that I wanted to make on the word ahi. I think there is something that is quite more complicated. I mean, this universal mind. In my speech, I mentioned that the book of Dzian has a word, konchok. This is the word that is used in classical Tibetan texts. And there are different meanings to this word. And all these meanings are very lofty. This is a concept that is hard to explain. It is something very lofty, very philosophical. And one of the meanings is a gem, a jewel, or ratma. There is such concept. We do have these jewels, right? Buddha, the teaching of Buddha. These are these jewels. This is the supreme part of Buddhism. This is the most valuable part of Buddhism, and this is what people pursue. Then there is the word, or rather the second meaning of this word. This is the highest spiritual principle. I think that Russian and English cannot convey what this word means in Tibetan language. And here is what's quite curious. Christian ministries arrived to Tibet, and they started telling about God to Tibetans. And they took that word, konchok, and they used this word to refer to a deity in Christian understanding. HPB took a word that she translated as the universal mind. And so apparently this is something that is very, very supreme. And even the word, or rather the concept, the universal mind, does not even reflect, does not even explain what it all means. And here is what I wanted to tell you about.
Thanks a lot. Hold on a second. Hold on a second, please. I would like to go back to my system of deciphering. There is a Tibetan word that means the best, the highest, which is linked to the most important God. That sounds like Samvara in Sanskrit. Demchok equals to Buddha. And when deciphering, Buddha means the planet Mercury, that in its turn means the wise. Can you see that? The word that we've been just discussing, razum, also exists in Tibetan as wise. So online, we also have a few comments. If we can display the colleagues on the screen. Do you have any comments, any ideas? I would like to hear the commentary of Mr. Pandey. Mr. Pandey,
hello.
Do you have any comments? Do you have anything to say regarding the third shloka, the first stanza?
No, I have not this one read before this Congress. I had read much earlier. So I'd like to skip my comment, and this I was not prepared for this. I had prepared only for the presentation. But in any way, since we are discussing the mind, and mind is the key factor in whole evolution. Mind, as our donor speaker told, is the link connecting our higher plane to the lower plane. The definition of man is the highest spirit and lowest matter connected by mind. So mind is directly an emanation of the universal mind, which is the manifestation of the Logos itself at the commencement of the Manvantaras. This universal mind is the integrated intelligence. This is the integrated consciousness from which we derive our individual consciousness, our individual manas principle, and do all the work, whether in this world or in the spiritual, our practices. So that way, the mind is important and most key factor for any work, mental work. And mind is also called, it creates bondage in the world, and it is also an agent for liberation. Only through mind we can understand what is called illusion or Maya. And once we understand, then we try to pierce that Maya again through the mind. But then mind works at different levels. In fact, as Theosophy defines it is 2 levels, or Vedanta philosophy defines at 4 levels, and Buddhist philosophy defines at many levels, more than 100 levels. So modern psychologists, broadly they say 3 levels: conscious, subconscious, supraconscious. So the point is that different levels of mind are recognized, whether by philosophy, by psychology, by various schools of the thought. And we have to clearly understand our level of mind at which we are working, and our effort should be to go to higher level when we say to go higher level, it only means that we bring the lower level of mind in tune with the functioning of higher mind. And that is the whole, in nutshell, the definition of any spiritual practice, and maybe yoga, maybe meditation, maybe serious study. And then by mind only we render service also. So it becomes complete study, meditation, and service only by mind. In fact, therefore, it is behind that. It is also said, the mind is the real man, thinker is the real man. So that is what I would like to comment about the mind. Thank you very much.
Господин Панди, огромное спасибо. Михаил Николаевич, вы хотите...
Thank you very much, Mr. Pandey. Michael. Yes, I also wanted to add a few words to what Georgi said. He was talking about Tibetan and Sanskrit texts, and that he said that he didn't find ahi anywhere. And ati is a Scandinavian root, and it means dragon. So that means the dragon. Take another look to Edda, and that's when you will understand. I would also like to remind you that Nikolai Roerich, when he was in Mongolia, when he was studying Buddhism, he had associations with Scandinavian countries. So this was a synthesis of different cultures that was connected with different roots and linguistic roots, and maybe the rest of the migration of atlases, that can be the root. Thank you very much, Michael. It was a very interesting comment that ahi can also be traced back to Scandinavian languages. HBB talks about the seven-ray star as the flaming dragon of wisdom. So that was a very clear translation and a very clear understanding. As for Mr. Pandey was saying, I wanted to add that the mind, when we say that that mind can connect the manifested and unmanifested at the earth and the heaven, we also know that there are 7 bodies, 7 principles that HPB defined quite clearly. The lower manas, the higher manas, and so on and so forth. And what is this connecting element? The synthesis, that connecting element that is actually the plate of mind, which is the heart, the 6th principle. And it's also interesting, I've just thought that there are 3 different stages of the development of consciousness. The first stage is learning to reason, learning to reflect. That's when the brain works. Then the person learns to put those thoughts together and reflect on the basis of what he has come to. And then the third stage is the highest stage. So those 3 stages of thinking, the most basic one and the highest one, this is the first manifestation of the blazing dragon of wisdom. So that's what I wanted to add to. If there are no more comments, I would also like to share another idea with you, another thought, if you don't mind. So here is what I found. When HPB was saying that ahi, just like many of you quoted a lot, that ahi is the guide, the guides, then there is something that before ahi became he, so before that exhalation, there was one little detail. Let's have a look at the quotation, and then I'll share my idea with you. Ahi, the hierarchy of spiritual beings that manifest the universal mind, the guides of the universal will, setting in nature its laws. And that expression, Ahi, that sets the natures of the law. So Ahi, at the beginning, create the appropriate basis that is only later going to become that guide, that mediator to set its laws, the hidden laws. You know, that's something that transforms everything. So the hierarchy of those heavenly beings, Dzian koans, were initially the basis to find the laws of nature and not to impose our own natures. So at the very beginning there was a very pure fundamental understanding. Only later, in the matter of space or a certain plane, those very same Ahi started manifesting that. They act according to the law that they have possession of by higher forces. So that means, let's concentrate. That means that at the beginning, that was the key principle to find those laws, nature's laws. Those laws that were imposed from the above by the higher forces. And the higher forces asked the lower forces. That's a detail that I found. And that changes the whole hierarchical understanding. Initially, the higher forces asked actually the lower forces, can we manifest here? And those Dzian koan rays that provided the first light prepared the matter for manifestation. And there is an idea how that happened, if I may. So the seven-ray star on this plane created that very basis. So that star asked why. Because we know that those guides, Dzian Kogans, they later did some other actions on that plane. And so Dzian Kogans are associated with the seven-ray star. And I don't really know how to put it. That great manifestation of the highest hierarchy, where the higher asked the lower, and then the lower gave a permission, and then the higher proceeded. So the seven-ray star is not by chance drawn in one movement. Do you know how it is? Like that. Not stopping at any point. Seven-ray star. That's basically one single ray. Not seven rays, just one ray. Seven ray in its potentiality. That's one unique ray of those seven unmanifested rays. So that's like Elena Roerich says is the where everything else appears on. And those were the rays. Those were the rays of seven main planets: the Sun, the Moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, and Saturn. And those seven rays that lie at the basis of Kala Chakra, that defines seven rays, 5 elements, and so on. A single movement. That logos, which is the first manifestation in its essence. In its essence has three elements. These are three elements that Trinity led to more and more phenomena. And I just thought about it, and I was struck by that idea of those nature's laws that were supposed to be manifested and not imposed, not some new laws that were meant to be imposed. More comments, please. And now you have mentioned something that's really essential for individuality. The individuality, the personality that is manifested like that. Sometimes people just do not have any personality, do not have any individuality. So if there is no reverence, then the consciousness cannot manifest as one of the aspects of personality. It just cannot manifest, cannot start developing, improving, evolving. That's what everything starts with. And that state that we can call the reason of the reasonless reason. It's a very important thing. And if we use those terms, then we come to the nature of things, because the nature of things in itself is reasonless or causeless. So reasonless or causeless not in the meaning that there is no reason, there is no cause. It just influences in ourselves by being spontaneous, by the higher law being spontaneous. There is an impulse there. And that is why that causeless impulse, it's unconscious, it's causeless, and it is manifested in the human nature as an instinct, but not a low instinct, but the instinct of spirit. That's something that we should eventually arrive at. That higher order of the movement of spirit, of that fire of spirit, of the seed of spirit that contains the essence. That's very important. And that's when the causeless cause of everything in ourselves will drive us to do something, because that's the result of accumulation of something, because we are like a vessel that gets filled with something that gets accumulated in this vessel. Thank you. And so the universal mind that always exists in Pralaya, in Manvantara, cannot be changed. However, I have that property to make a phenomenon out of nomen, or become a vehicle, a conductor. It was not me saying that, of course, that was HPB. So simple and so vivid. So the explanation of Ahi is very vivid. And really, that's just the blazing dragon of wisdom. Are there any more comments about those details that we have discovered together as a group? Nadezhda, do you have any comments? If you have, please come up on stage. Nadezhda Alexandrovna. Dear colleagues, to be honest, I learned a lot today. And I wanted to add the 20th lesson of the Temple of Humanity that was given around 100 years ago. So there were also works that many people yet have to learn. So lesson 20 is the control of life forces. It starts by a very deep, profound sentence that says, in the end, the whole being is a vibration, and all topics or subjects appear dependent on the speed of that vibration. So our favorite subject that was present yesterday and came up today, and Evgenia Shabornikova's presentation, which says the great creative power defined by the life principle in its highest aspect is the Trinity, consisting of wish, will, and mind. Wish is the leading power that has already been mentioned by Vladimir. So the will is the moving force that accelerates the energy that contains the principle of sound in the matrix. The mind, the light, yeah? The bearing power, the bearing force, and the matrix of time where the will and the wish come together. And there are so many things in the temple of humanity, so many things that should be published and should be investigated, should be studied by ourselves, by us. I'm really grateful for everything that we have heard today and everything that I've learned.
Colleagues who are here with us online, if you have something to add, please do. Maybe you have some suggestions, or maybe you have some conclusions to make. Now let's refer to Sergey Kolganov. Please be closer to the microphone. Yes, please. I just would like to make a short comment. What I want to say is I want to refer to the work of one of the great Rosicrucians. There was a great work by Handel. In that book, he asks a question. Why is the period of silence needed? Why is pralaya necessary? And Handel thought that pralaya is necessary to transform this experience, the experience that was accumulated during the Manvantara period. Because this is actually the manifestation of the free will of those beings who lived during that period. And as a result, we have ethnogenesis. This can also be called reformism. This is free will. Free will, that means having freedom to start something new. Something new is the period of Manvantara. It emerges. Then this something entirely new is included into the general picture. And then there is the next stage of manifestation. These are the highest beings. They use the experience of the lower beings, and that creates a more advantageous environment. So it means that the will of the lower group is taken into account by the higher group, and that happens during the pralaya period. Thank you very much, Sergey. This is indeed a very good comment. Now let's turn to Ritva. Ritva, I see that you have something today. Please do speak.
I want to say something, communication, because this is very important. I think so. Nowadays, in Theosophical society, if we really understand what you mean karma, we understand we born sometimes Russian, sometimes Finland, sometimes India, and so on. And if you deep level understand that, we understand we have to learn every places and when we meet different people, and that is most important today, I think so, because that is crowd when we thinking how we work together, and we can respect different places, different people. And I have very touched this day and yesterday also. And I want to ask, maybe this is my own words only, but when we speak time and how we use time, and Buddhist, there is 84,000 teaching. And I have heard also we have 84,000 skandhat, affliction, and so on. And I look at watch. There is 60 seconds in minutes, and a minutes in hour, or 3,600 second. And then I look at there is about 86,000 or 400 second in one. What is the vuorokausi? I don't remember word, but you understand, 24 hours. And every moment we have teaching, and every moment we have present 100%, if you really understand. And every time we can change our karma if we learn and when we look at on others and this world. And this is something new religion in world, I think so, Theosophy. We don't need something dogmatic and so on, but really deep level. And that is reason, example, Buddhist idea is touched me very much when I research secret doctrine. It's so difficult to me. Maybe you have very lot of intelligence, but I need something support many level, and I have lot of support just Buddhist idea. I want to say, if somebody knows this, something contact, just 84,000 teaching and classes and minutes. Maybe there is something. That is my questions to you. But I want to thank you, translator also. You are wonderful. Your voice so wonderful. I mean, it's amazing how you can translate 2 days, all time. And if sometimes I speak Finnish and you can translate my speak English, because you are so good. Thank you very much. That is all what I have to say.
Ritva, дорогая, огромное спасибо.
Ritva, thank you very much. Now let's turn to Mikhail. You have 30 seconds. Friends, you know, in the end, I have something today. The humanity is going through serious challenges. These challenges are related to the new spatial environment. There are the rays that change everything. The planet changes. There is the new sky and the new earth. I just want to say that we are now in a special aura of the new arrival. And the energy of the new arrival creates all these challenges. It cleans the lower layers. And for that reason, there are lots of difficult processes going on. Lots of things are now occurring, something that was forecast a very long time. This is all the epidemics and everything. This is the process of cleaning. This is related to the evolutionary process. I now would like to turn to Gita. The fourth book, the fourth chapter of Bhagavad Gita says, I proclaim Vivasvanta. Then there was Manu. Mana turned to Ikshvatu. And Raja Rishi learned it. But then long time has passed and this sloka was lost. And now I give this yoga to you, and it contains the highest secret. Arjuna says, you were born later. How do I understand that you have proclaimed it at the very start? And Krishna said that I had lots of other incarnations. I know I am Atman. I am unchanging. I am reborn in my Maya each time when dharma is weakened. And I do this to save those who deserve to be saved, and I continue doing that. And I continue doing that. That was the quotation. And this is what refers to the Sun dynasty. This refers to Kshatri. Kshatris were the highest caste. And the power will be the spiritual power. And I just now would like to give yet another quotation from the Gospel. The Gospel says, Jesus says, there is one true way. The world will see me. I will live, and you will live too. And you will know that I am in Father, you are in me, and the Father is in us. This is how I would like to conclude, and this is how I would like to lead the way into the 5th Congress. Thank you very much. Ritva, indeed, you spoke beautifully. And yet again, we talk about this theme about space and time. And I think that indeed the next Congress will be dedicated to space and time. We will be discussing Sloka 4 at that time, and I think it will be of high relevance. The questions that you made today actually can have answers during our group discussions. I would like to say that Ritva Lappi made a comment about our today's interpreters. And Ritva, when you were interpreted, when you were speaking, I actually wanted to say that I am very grateful to our today's interpreters. We had 7 interpreters. They got very inspired with our work, and they interpret your speeches, and we have a very beautiful poetic explanation of everything what is happening today. Julia Nikitina, Olga Isaeva, Anna Duv, Tatiana Arzamasova, Maria Ponomaryova, Victoria, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your inspiration. Thank you very much for your translation. You are trying to convey these great symbols. These are great words. These are words that are so full of wisdom, and you are trying to convey this in every word that you used. Friends, now let's speak about the outcomes. Sloka 3, Stanza 1. On the planes of being, Stanza 1 explains the equality of the unmanifested being. We are in the absolute. Sloka 3 takes us to the 3rd plane. This is Mahatmas. This is the mind that can be manifested. 1 plus 3 equals 4. It means that we see the manifestation of the fourth plane. It is then manifested to the lower plane, and then it shines. When all this happens, when there is potency, the universal mind was not. There was a period of pralaya, because there was no ahi. There was no foundation through which it could be manifested. And ahi were not there to contain the universal mind. And it is only after that the mind could be manifested, and it will be manifested. And of course, it will continue when there is a differentiation and so on. There is cosmogony, there is an explanation of the hierarchy of the celestial beings, and there are so many of them. I think every one of you, I think the research group, I thank the participants, I thank the research group specifically for their work today during the work of the roundtable discussion. Theosophical knowledge is going out into the world, and theosophical knowledge can give an explanation of everything from a new standpoint. This knowledge is given in the secret doctrine. And HBP dedicated this work to the true Theosophists. We now live in times when it is highly relevant to discuss and to study the stanzas in the secret doctrine. When we study the secret doctrine, we reaffirm the importance of HPB and her great contribution to the science. And today, every participant contributed to the work of HPB and to our work.